The universe has a funny way of teaching you what really matters. One moment you think you've built something solid, a marriage, a friendship, a life, and the next, you're standing there like an idiot while it all crumbles between your fingers. My name is Caleb Grant. I'm 43, and until 3 months ago, I thought I knew what my life was. Turns out, I was the punchline to a joke I didn't even know was being told. It was my birthday. 43 years on this planet, 15 of them married to Madison. We'd built what I thought was a good life in a quiet, affluent suburb of Denver. My logistics company wasn't a global behemoth, but it was profitable, respectable. We had the sprawling house with the pool I'd had installed for our 10th anniversary, the friends who came over for barbecues, the comfortable routines that felt like security. Madison had quit her marketing job a few years back, saying she wanted to focus on her personal brand on Instagram. I supported her, like I always did. Why wouldn't I? Her happiness, I'd always believed, was intertwined with my own. And then there was Sebastian Thorne. He had been in our lives for nearly a decade, a magnetic and charming fixture in our social circle. He was that friend who always knew someone, always had an angle on some new investment opportunity, always had a story that topped yours. I never fully trusted him. There was a slickness to him, a predatory gleam in his eyes that he masked with an easy smile. But Madison thought he was brilliant. He understands how the world really works, Caleb, she'd say. I'd nod and think, yeah, and he'd sell his mother for the right price. I'd invited just a few people over for dinner that night. Nothing flashy, good steaks, expensive bourbon, the kind of evening where you can relax with the people who are supposed to matter most. Sebastian arrived 20 minutes late, of course with a bottle of scotch that cost more than I knew he could afford, unless his latest sure thing had actually paid off. Madison wore the red dress I bought her for Valentine's Day. Her hair was done differently, something with more volume that she'd been experimenting with lately. When Sebastian walked in, something shifted in the air. I felt it but ignored it. It was the way you ignore the first faint whiff of smoke, convincing yourself it's just someone's cooking from next door. We were halfway through dinner, the conversation flowing as smoothly as the alcohol, when I noticed it. It wasn't a grand, cinematic betrayal. It was small, insidious, and all the more devastating for its casualness. I saw Madison's hand disappear under the table, not onto her own lap, onto Sebastian's thigh. Her wedding ring, the one I'd slid onto her finger 15 years ago in a sun-drenched chapel in Napa, caught the light from our dining room chandelier as her fingers traced slow, deliberate patterns on his leg. She didn't even try to hide it. Worse, when she caught me looking, her eyes met mine not with panic or shame, but with a cold, defiant challenge I'd never seen before. The world seemed to slow down. The clinking of silverware, the low hum of conversation from our other guests, our neighbors, the Millers, and my colleague Dave with his wife Sarah, all faded into a dull roar in my ears. I tried to salvage something from the moment, to pretend I hadn't seen what I'd just seen. Seems like everyone's enjoying themselves tonight, I said, my voice coming out colder and tighter than I intended. That's when she said it. My wife of 15 years, looking me dead in the eye, said, "If you don't like it, Caleb, you can leave. We're having fun." Sebastian laughed. It wasn't an embarrassed, uncomfortable chuckle. It was triumphant. It was the laugh of a man who had just won something significant, and I was the fool at the table who didn't understand the game everyone else was playing. My grip tightened around my fork, the tines pressing into my palm. I looked at our other guests. The Millers suddenly became intensely interested in the marbling of their steaks. Dave looked down, refusing to meet my gaze. Only his wife, Sarah, darted her eyes between us with an undisguised, horrified fascination. "You can't be serious," I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. "Oh, I'm serious," Madison said, her voice carrying a hint of wine-soaked bravado. "Sebastian and I were just discussing how stifling suburban life can be, how people get trapped in routines, forgetting to actually live." Sebastian leaned back in his chair, a smug smile playing on his lips. "Life's too short for pretense, isn't it, Caleb? In movies, this is the part where the husband flips the table, throws a punch, makes a scene. But I just felt this strange Arctic calm washing over me, as if I were watching the scene from somewhere high above. I saw myself, a man in a nice shirt at his own birthday party, being publicly castrated. And in that moment, something inside me broke, but something else, something harder and colder, began to form in its place. I stood up slowly. I placed my napkin beside my half-eaten steak, picked up my jacket from the back of the chair, and looked at both of them. "Thank you," I said, my voice even. "Now I know exactly where I stand." Caleb, come on, Dave started, half rising from his seat. Let's not. I raised a hand to stop him. It's fine, Dave. Enjoy the rest of dinner. The bourbon's on the bar if anyone wants more. And I walked out. No drama, no slamming doors, just the quiet, final click of our front door closing behind me, sealing off a life that was no longer mine. I drove aimlessly for hours, the glittering Denver skyline a mocking jewel in my rearview mirror. The miles passed in a blur of headlights and lonely street lamps. Eventually, I pulled into the parking lot of a roadside motel on the outskirts of town, the kind of place with a flickering neon sign that promises anonymity and despair in equal measure. I didn't go in immediately. I just sat in my car, the engine off, staring at nothing, feeling something crystallize inside me. The rage and hurt were there, of course, but they were being compressed into a single, hard point of clarity. My phone kept lighting up. Text from Madison. Where are you? You're being ridiculous. Come home so we can talk about this like adults. An adult conversation about her infidelity at my birthday dinner. The audacity was breathtaking. Then a text from Dave. She sent everyone home. You okay, man? I ignored them all. A light rain began to fall, streaking the windshield, blurring the neon vacancy sign into a watercolor smear. I thought about the last 15 years, the compromises, the plans we'd made, the trust I had given so freely. I'd always prided myself on being level-headed, rational, the guy who found solutions instead of creating more problems. But what was the solution here? What was the rational response to having your life systematically dismantled at your own dinner table? I finally checked into the motel under my middle name, James. The room smelled of discount cleaning products and desperation, but it was quiet. I lay on the bed, fully clothed, staring at water stains on the ceiling that looked like continents on a map of a world I didn't recognize anymore. By morning, the grief had subsided, replaced by a cold, resolute purpose. I knew exactly what I needed to do. Frank Miller had done some security consulting for my company years ago before starting his own business. He was ex-military, discreet, and unnervingly competent. We'd stayed in loose contact, the occasional beer when our paths crossed. He answered on the third ring. Caleb, man, it's been a minute. Everything okay? Not really, I said, my voice flat. But I'm handling it. I need some specialized equipment, discreet stuff. Can I buy you breakfast? 2 hours later, we were sitting in a booth at a diner far enough from my neighborhood that I wouldn't run into anyone I knew. The air was thick with the smell of coffee and bacon. I laid out the situation, not the emotional wreckage, but the tactical problem. Frank listened without interrupting, his expression serious as he stirred his coffee. When I was done, he summarized it in his typical blunt fashion. So, basically, you want to turn your house into a surveillance operation without anyone knowing. I want to see with my own eyes what's happening in my home when I'm not there. I corrected him. I'm not looking to gather evidence for a messy court battle just yet. I just need to know the unvarnished truth. Frank studied me for a long moment, his gaze analytical. This isn't like you, Caleb. You're the calm and collected type. Maybe that's the problem, I said, my voice low. Maybe I've been too much like me for too long. He gave a slow, single nod. I can do it. But Caleb, be prepared for what you might find. Some truths are harder to face than uncertainty. I'm already facing the worst, I replied. At least this way, I'll know for sure. I slid an envelope thick with cash across the table. He didn't count it. When do you want to do this? 3 days later, while Madison was at her weekly yoga class, Frank installed 4 cameras in our house. He worked with quiet efficiency. One in the living room disguised as a smoke detector. One in the kitchen, hidden inside a new digital picture frame I'd bought as a surprise for Madison. One overlooking the pool area, camouflaged as part of the outdoor speaker system. And one in our bedroom, tucked into a high shelf of a bookcase, where Madison never looked because she didn't read anything that wasn't on her phone anymore. All feeds went directly to a secure cloud server that only I could access. That night, I went back to the house to pack a suitcase. Madison was there, her expression a volatile mix of anger and panic. What is this? Like a separation? Call it whatever you want, I said, pulling shirts from the closet. I call it taking a step back to reevaluate things. This is ridiculous, Caleb. It was just some harmless flirting. You're blowing everything out of proportion. I zipped up the suitcase and turned to face her. Maybe, but I need some time. Time for what? To punish me? I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I had built my life with, the face I had woken up to for over 5,000 mornings. Suddenly, she seemed like a stranger wearing my wife's features. Time to see clearly, I said. Her face hardened. Fine. Run away. That's what you do best anyway, isn't it? When things get uncomfortable, when real emotions are involved, you check out. You've been absent for years. I shouldered my bag, ignoring the barb. It was a classic deflection, a desperate attempt to shift the blame. I paused at the bedroom door, my hand on the doorknob. I expected loyalty, Madison. Basic human decency. If you were unhappy, you could have said something. We could have worked on it, or ended things cleanly. But this was a choice, a series of choices. I walked out without looking back. I settled into the sterile, modern apartment downtown. It had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a view that should have been inspiring but felt alien. During the day, I went to work. I ran my company, made decisions, signed contracts. I was a model of efficiency. At night, I would come back to my temporary home, pour a glass of whiskey, and sometimes I would open my laptop and watch. I became the ghost in my own house. For 11 days, nothing noteworthy happened. Madison went about her routine. Yoga classes, coffee with friends, hours spent staging photos for her Instagram in various corners of our home. It was a performance of a perfect life that she was desperately trying to maintain, even with me gone. She called me several times a day, her tone alternating between rage, manipulation, and tearful apologies. I kept our conversations brief, non-committal, a gray rock against her emotional storm. On the 12th day, everything changed. I was in my apartment, reviewing some contracts, when my phone chimed with a notification. Motion detected in pool area. It was a Tuesday afternoon, 2:17 p.m. Madison was supposed to be at her yoga class until 3:30. My heart hammered against my ribs as I opened the feed. The video was crystal clear. Madison and Sebastian emerged from the house onto the pool deck. She was laughing, her head tilted back, a glass of what looked like champagne in her hand. He had his arm around her waist, his fingers splayed possessively across her hip. The outdoor microphone picked up his voice clearly over the hum of the pool filter. To new beginnings, I heard Sebastian say, raising his own glass. Aren't you jumping the gun a little? Madison replied. But she was smiling, a wide, genuine smile I hadn't seen directed at me in years. He's only been gone for 2 weeks. Trust me, Sebastian said, his voice oozing confidence. He's not coming back. Not after what he saw. Men like Caleb, their ego can't handle being disrespected like that. Madison took a long sip of her champagne. You seem awfully confident about my marriage. I'm confident about us, Sebastian said, pulling her closer. I've waited long enough, don't you think? They kissed by the edge of the pool. It wasn't the hesitant, exploratory kiss of people crossing a line for the first time. It was the familiar, hungry kiss of lovers who had done this many, many times before. I watched, feeling strangely detached, as if I were a scientist observing a specimen. They undressed each other and slipped into the water, into the pool I'd had built as an anniversary surprise for her. I downloaded the video file, labeled it Pool Day 12, and closed my laptop. The cold point of clarity inside me had just been sharpened into a razor's edge. Over the next 3 weeks, I collected more evidence than I ever wanted to see. They were careful, but not careful enough. They met at our house when they thought I was at work or out of town. The most painful video came on our 16th wedding anniversary. Out of a deeply ingrained habit, I had sent flowers to the house. The card was neutral, just, thinking of you today. That night, the bedroom camera, which I rarely checked, sent a notification. I opened the feed with a sense of dread. There was Madison, leading Sebastian into our bedroom, into our bed. My flowers were visible on the nightstand beside them, a silent, floral witness to the ultimate betrayal. After witnessing this, I broke my own rule. I called her. She answered, sounding slightly caught off guard. Caleb? Did you get the flowers? I asked, my voice steady despite the turmoil raging inside me. Yes, she said. Thank you. They're beautiful. Did you enjoy them? There was a pause. Caleb, what's this about? Just wondering if you and Sebastian enjoyed the flowers I sent while you were screwing in our bed. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear her breathing change, catching in her throat. What are you talking about? She finally managed. But her voice was a thin, reedy whisper that had already given her away. Don't insult my intelligence by lying, Madison, I said, the coldness in my voice surprising even me. Not anymore. You're spying on me. Now there was real anger, the fury of being caught. You put cameras in our house. That's illegal. Is that really the hill you want to die on right now, Madison? Legality? She hung up. I expected her to call back, to rage or cry or threaten. Instead, there was silence for 3 days. Then a single text. We need to talk, face to face. We met at a sterile coffee shop downtown. She looked haggard, dark circles under her eyes that her makeup couldn't hide. How long? I asked, getting straight to the point. She stared into her untouched latte. 6 months, she admitted. 6 months. Half a year of lies, of coming home to me, of sleeping beside me, of making plans for a future she was actively sabotaging. He made me feel alive, she said defensively, as if that excused everything. When was the last time you looked at me the way he does? When was the last time you gave me a chance? I countered. When was the last time you were present in this marriage, instead of curating a fake life on your phone? She eventually asked the inevitable question. What happens now? Now, I said, leaning forward slightly, I protect myself, and you face the consequences. I had my evidence. It was time to build my legal fortress. That afternoon, I called Eleanor Hayes. Eleanor Hayes and I had briefly worked at the same corporate law firm 15 years ago before I left to start my own company. She'd gone on to become one of Denver's most respected independent attorneys, specializing in family law and complex financial litigation. More importantly, she was whip-smart, unflappable, and someone I trusted. You look like hell, Caleb, were her first words to me as we sat down in a quiet cafe. Thanks, Eleanor. I feel worse. I gave her the condensed version. The affair, the public humiliation, the cameras, the evidence of Sebastian's financial entanglement with Madison that I had started to uncover through my own preliminary digging. She listened intently, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Do you want to try counseling? Salvage the marriage? She asked when I was finished. I looked out the window at the people passing by on the street, all of them moving with purpose toward destinations they believed in. There's nothing to salvage, I said finally. The foundation is gone. I just don't want to be destroyed in the demolition. Eleanor nodded once. All business. Okay. I'll need to see your prenuptial agreement, all financial records, property deeds, the works. And Caleb, she hesitated, this is going to get messy. Are you prepared for that? I'm already in the mess, I told her. I'm just trying to find the cleanest way through. What I didn't tell her was that I'd already mapped out a path forward. This wasn't just about a divorce strategy. This was about consequences. The first move was subtle. 2 weeks after meeting with Eleanor, I posted a single photo on my dormant Facebook page. It was a picture of Eleanor and me at a restaurant downtown, dressed nicely, clinking wine glasses in a toast. The caption read, "Changes are not always losses. Sometimes they're liberations." It was the first personal thing I'd posted in months. Within minutes, my phone was blowing up, friends commenting with a mixture of confusion and support. And Madison. Madison called 17 times in a row. When I didn't answer, she started texting, a frantic barrage of words. What the hell is this? Are you seriously trying to make me jealous? Who is she? We need to talk right now. I didn't respond. The next day, I changed my relationship status from married to it's complicated, another small move on the chessboard. Madison showed up at my office unannounced that afternoon, barging past my assistant with a fury that would have impressed me if it hadn't been so misplaced. What the hell do you think you're doing? She demanded, slamming the door behind her. I looked up from my computer, deliberately calm. Working. What are you doing? Don't play dumb, Caleb. The photo, the relationship status. You're trying to humiliate me. I leaned back in my chair. Interesting perspective. I post a photo of myself having dinner, and somehow that's about humiliating you. Is she just a friend? Madison's voice was tight with anger. Because it sure as hell didn't look that way. And you're an expert on what affairs look like, aren't you? She flinched as if I'd slapped her. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. You want to talk about fair? A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill, Madison. A mistake is burning dinner. What you did was a choice. Multiple choices made day after day for 6 months. Her anger seemed to deflate, leaving her looking small and uncertain in the middle of my office. What do you want from me, Caleb? Nothing, I said simply. Not anymore. Is she your lawyer? She asked suddenly, her eyes narrowing. The woman in the photo. Is that what this is about? You're already planning to divorce me? I didn't answer, which was answer enough. After 15 years, this is how you end it? A Facebook post and a lawyer? No, Madison, I said, finally letting some of my own controlled anger show. You ended it in our dining room in front of our friends. You ended it every time you snuck around with Sebastian behind my back. You ended it when you brought him into our bed. Don't you dare put this on me. Then, the financial maneuvers Eleanor had helped me plan began. I froze the joint credit cards. I transferred my direct deposits to a new private account. And Eleanor formally notified Madison's soon-to-be-hired lawyer that we intended to activate the morality clause in our prenuptial agreement, a provision Madison had signed without much thought years earlier, probably assuming infidelity would never be an issue. A week later, Madison found she could only access a limited portion of our joint funds. That same day, I made a few discreet calls to business contacts who I knew were also involved in one of Sebastian's speculative real estate deals. I didn't say much, just asked some pointed questions about his financing and risk assessment. The seeds of doubt were sown. 3 days later, an auditor from the bank contacted Madison about discrepancies in the loan guarantee documents she had signed for Sebastian's ventures. The social dominoes began to fall next. It started with Michelle, Madison's closest friend. I had agonized over it, but Eleanor advised it was a necessary step. I sent Michelle a single, undeniable clip, the video of Madison and Sebastian by the pool, toasting to their new beginning. I wasn't interested in a smear campaign, but our closest friends deserved to know the truth. Michelle sent Madison a text that Madison later forwarded to me in a furious screenshot. It read, "I saw the video, Em. I can't believe you would do this to Caleb. I need some space from our friendship right now." One by one, Madison's social circle contracted. Not because I asked anyone to choose sides, but because the truth, once revealed, has its own gravity. The life she had curated so carefully was imploding. The Hennepin County Family Court was a sterile, imposing building. As I walked in, I saw Madison sitting on the opposite side of the courtroom with her lawyer, Richard Stanton, a man known for his aggressive, theatrical courtroom presence. Madison was dressed conservatively in a navy blue suit, a calculated choice to make her look professional and vulnerable. She didn't meet my eyes. Judge Patricia Callahan was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s. She reviewed the preliminary filings with an unreadable expression. "Mr. Stanton," she began, her voice sharp, "your motion to invalidate the prenuptial agreement on grounds of duress seems questionable at best." Stanton rose. "Your Honor, my client was not properly represented when the agreement was updated 6 years ago. The addition of the morality clause was inserted without adequate explanation." Eleanor stood. "Your Honor, if I may." Mrs. Grant had independent counsel throughout the entire process. She holds a business degree and was an active participant in Mr. Grant's company for years. The suggestion that she didn't understand what she was signing is frankly insulting to her intelligence. It was a brilliant move, defending Madison's intelligence while using it against her. "Mr. Stanton," the judge said, "did your client have independent legal representation when signing this agreement?" Stanton hesitated. "Yes, but..." "Then I'm inclined to uphold the validity of the prenuptial agreement as written." Judge Callahan cut him off. The battle then turned to the video evidence. "Illegal recordings," Stanton boomed. "My client's privacy was violated by hidden cameras installed without her knowledge or consent." Eleanor was unflappable. "Your Honor, the home in question is solely in Mr. Grant's name. The cameras were installed in common areas of his property. Furthermore, Colorado is a single-party consent state for recordings. Mr. Grant, as the homeowner, provided that consent." The hearing dragged on. Stanton attempted to paint me as a controlling, emotionally abusive husband. Madison took the stand, her voice trembling as she testified. "He always needed to know where I was," she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "He questioned my friends, my spending. I felt trapped." "And your relationship with Mr. Thorne?" Stanton asked sympathetically. "How did that develop?" "Sebastian. He appreciated me," she whispered. "He valued my opinions. He made me feel seen in a way Caleb hadn't in years. When it was my turn, I spoke simply and directly. I loved my wife. I trusted her. I supported her decision to leave her career. I never restricted her spending. I never questioned her friendships until I witnessed her being unfaithful with my own eyes, in my own home, at my own birthday party." Eleanor then produced the financial records. Far from restricting her, I had provided Madison with a monthly allowance of $5,000 for personal expenses, separate from all household costs. She introduced emails where I had encouraged Madison's Instagram pursuits. The most damaging blow to Madison's narrative came when Eleanor called Michelle, her former best friend, to the stand. Reluctantly, Michelle testified that Madison had often complained not about my controlling behavior, but about my emotional distance and workaholic tendencies, a far cry from the abusive portrait she was now painting. "Did Mrs. Grant ever express fear of her husband?" Eleanor asked. "No," Michelle said quietly. "Never. Frustrated sometimes, but not afraid." By the end of the day, Judge Callahan was visibly irritated with Stanton's theatrics. The hearing ended with the judge taking the matter under advisement, but her direction was clear. As we left the courtroom, Madison confronted me in the hallway. "You're destroying everything," she hissed, her eyes blazing. "No, Madison," I said quietly, meeting her gaze. "You did that all by yourself." The second hearing, 3 weeks later, was a formality. Judge Callahan had made her decision. The prenuptial agreement was valid and enforceable. The morality clause was triggered. In practical terms, this meant Madison would receive exactly what the prenup specified in the case of infidelity: 20% of our communal assets, none of my business holdings, and no alimony. The house had to be sold, with the proceeds divided according to the same 80-20th split. Madison sat stone-faced as the judge delivered the ruling. That evening, sitting in my apartment with a glass of whiskey, I felt no triumph, no vindication, just a hollow completeness, like a circle finally closed. The aftermath for Madison and Sebastian was swift and brutal. His real estate project failed spectacularly when the primary investors pulled out. The bank began proceedings against him, and by extension, against Madison as his guarantor. She would spend years digging out from under that financial rubble. The most surprising twist came a week after the final divorce decree. Sebastian, facing financial ruin and potential criminal charges for loan fraud, turned on Madison. In a formal statement to the bank's investigators, he claimed she had been fully aware of the risky nature of the ventures, that she had been a willing and knowledgeable partner. Madison's frantic call came at midnight. "Did you know?" she demanded, her voice raw with disbelief. "Did you know he would throw me under the bus?" "I didn't know," I said truthfully. "But I'm not surprised. He's saying I was part of it all. They're talking about pressing charges, Caleb. There was a time when her distress would have moved me, when my instinct would have been to protect her. That time had passed. Maybe you should hire a good criminal defense attorney," I suggested coolly. "I hear Richard Stanton does some work in that area." The line went silent before she hung up. Through it all, I never raised my voice, never sent angry texts, never made public accusations. I simply set events in motion and then stepped aside, letting the natural consequences unfold. 6 months after that birthday dinner, I was sitting in a new office in Atlanta. I had relocated to expand my business into the Southeast market. My phone buzzed with a text from my former colleague, Dave. "Heard Madison is back to teaching part-time. Living in a 1-bedroom apartment over by the university. Thought you'd want to know." I didn't respond immediately. I looked out at the Atlanta skyline, so different from Denver's, and thought about cycles of destruction and rebuilding. Finally, I texted back, "I hope she finds what she's looking for." It was true. Despite everything, I didn't wish her ongoing misery. I just needed her to experience the full impact of her choices. Some lessons can only be learned through loss. Dating again was strange, but eventually I met Clara, a corporate attorney with a sharp mind and an easy laugh that felt like coming home to a place I'd never been before. We took things slowly, both of us carrying baggage from our pasts. But with her, there were no games, no pretense, just honesty. A year to the day after that fateful birthday dinner, I wasn't in Denver. I was standing on the rim of the Grand Canyon at sunset. I had flown out for a weekend getaway with Clara. The sinking sun painted the canyon walls in fiery shades of orange, red, and purple. There was no cell signal, no connection to the life I'd left behind. I didn't need it. The quiet satisfaction of having navigated through the inferno of betrayal without becoming bitter or broken was enough. That night, sitting on the porch of our cabin under a blanket of stars, so bright they seemed artificial, Clara asked me what I was thinking about. I considered the question carefully, a glass of whiskey in my hand. "I was thinking about how you sometimes have to lose everything to figure out what you actually need," I told her. "And it's never what you thought it was." She nodded, her head resting on my shoulder. "Sometimes the best things in life are built on the ruins of what fell apart." I raised my glass to that, to new beginnings, to the strange alchemy that transforms humiliation into determination and betrayal into clarity. Madison and Sebastian had laughed in my face that night, thinking they'd taken everything from me. But in the end, their laughter had been the key that unlocked my cage. It had freed me to build something better, something stronger, something that was truly mine. And that was a victory no one could ever take away.